While I was in the ICU fighting for my life, my wife emptied our accounts and vanished. Her message? I deserve this. She thought I wouldn't make it. But I did. And I didn't go home, I went to war. When she stood before the judge, broke and cornered, he said, "You're lucky I'm not filing charges." She tried to erase me. Instead, I erased her future. While I was in the hospital unconscious, my wife cleared out my bank account. As said in the message, I deserve this after everything I've done for you. I gave one thumbs up in response. I did not return home the day after I was released from the hospital. Jack Mercer is my given name. I've been driving a semi for 22 years, and I'm 45 years old. Although it wasn't a glamorous existence, it covered the expenses and allowed Vanessa to continue living the way she had never valued. For weeks, I had been experiencing that constriction in my chest. I convinced myself it was simply the awful roadside coffee and long hours, just stress. Till I was unable to ignore it any longer. The discomfort was so intense that I had to pull over somewhere outside of Omaha. I made my own 911 call. I was transported to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. As it happened, I wasn't experiencing a panic attack. My heart was beating rapidly. Before everything became black, I could still picture the doctor's face. She declared, "We're losing him. Just what you don't want to hear just before you faint." I woke up 2 days later with a stent in my heart and tubes in my arms. I had flatlined twice, the nurse informed me. Claimed I was fortunate. I didn't feel fortunate. There was just one message from Vanessa on my phone when I checked it. We had been wed for 15 years. No children, just a Sioux Falls mortgage and many quiet dinners at home in between hauls. A screenshot of our shared account balance of $0 was included in the mail. She wrote beneath it. "After everything I've done for you, I deserve this. $61,438.72. Lost. My emergency savings. My account for truck upkeep. My safety net for retirement. Everything is gone." I ought to have sensed something. Perhaps anger. Rather, I simply felt worn out. Sleep couldn't make me feel any less exhausted. I emoji'd her with a thumbs up. Nothing more. I needed to rest, the doctor said when he arrived. Steer clear of stress. For a minimum of 6 weeks, refrain from driving. He inquired as to whether I would be picked up tomorrow. Yes, I said under false pretenses. I called my brother Ray that evening. The opposite side of town was where he lived. It wasn't because we were arguing that we hadn't spoken in months. Simply put, our lives were different. I said, "I need your favor." He said without hesitation, "Name it." "I need somewhere to stay for a few days. I also need you to keep Vanessa in the dark." A pause occurred. "She is unaware of your existence?" I answered, "Oh, she knows. She simply isn't aware that I'm not returning home." Vanessa and I met outside of Cheyenne at a gas stop. I was the one who pulled over to help her when she had a flat tire. She treated me like a hero back then since I knew how to use a jack. It's funny how that operates. Eventually, what initially impresses individuals simply becomes the norm. After 6 months, we were married. Swift, yet not careless. I was 30 years old. Her age was 27. Young enough to believe in something, old enough to know better. The money was good, and she enjoyed what it bought, but she never liked that I was gone for 3 weeks out of 4. Every night, regardless of the state I was in at the time, I would call. At times, the discussions went on for an hour. They became shorter as the years passed, 5 minutes of updates followed by a simple check-in. It was primarily messages during the past few years. Arrived in Nashville. Everything is fine here. In hindsight, there were indicators. She ceased inquiring about my return time. I began traveling with friends I had never met before. However, I had faith in her. Isn't that what marriage is? Have faith. I was escorted into my brother Ray's guest room. He works locally as a construction foreman. Twice divorced. Has some insight into how people might let you down. He said, "You ought to eat something." I didn't feel hungry. I had the house I had purchased on my mind. Regarding the refinance I completed 3 months prior when interest rates decreased. I took care of it myself because Vanessa had stated she was too busy to attend the signing. Since I had a higher credit score, just put it in my name. She didn't even request to view the documents. In addition, I had established a medical power of attorney for my friend Tim last year after he suffered a stroke and his fiancée was unable to make decisions for him. I became anxious. Ray's daughter, my niece Sophie, assisted me with it. Student of law. Clever child. She ensured that everything was in its proper place. Is Vanessa aware of your presence? Ray handed me a sandwich and asked. No, I replied. And we intend to maintain that situation for some time. She stole everything? I gave a nod. What are your plans? I nibbled on the sandwich. Tasted nothing at all. I'm going to sleep up. Orders from the doctor. However, I didn't sleep that night. I simply gazed at the ceiling, recalling all the minor instances in which Vanessa had appeared aloof, checking her phone beneath the table, altering passwords, and transferring funds between accounts, in search of higher interest rates. I had been blind. However, it is no longer the case. Our neighbor Greg texted me on my 3rd day at Ray's house. I haven't encountered you. Is everything alright? Vanessa is seeing a guy. I thought you ought to be aware. I spent a lot of time sitting with that. Didn't reply. Let it soak in. Ray and I took a car to the bank later that afternoon. It was the main office downtown, not our usual branch, where Vanessa and I were well known. I requested to talk to a fraud expert. Showed them the screenshot and the text message. I outlined how I had been admitted to the hospital unconscious. That I was unaware of or did not consent to the withdrawals. The woman at the counter maintained a bland expression. Expert. However, I could detect sympathy, and perhaps a hint of resentment on my part, in her eyes. "Mr. We can begin a fraud investigation, Doyle. However, since your wife has equal access to the joint account, it might be challenging to." I get it, I interrupted. But I want to give it a shot anyhow. After giving a nod, she began typing. We will require hospital paperwork attesting to your stay. Especially records of your periods of incapacity or unconsciousness. No issue. And you should be aware that the police will become involved if this turns into a criminal matter. I gave her a look. I know. We made a gas stop on the way back to Ray's. Ray pumped as I remained in the car. I saw a parent with 2 children purchasing ice cream from the convenience store through the windshield. All around me, normal life is happening. Do you want anything? Ray inquired. I gave a headshake. I called 3 times back at his location. I started by informing my dispatcher that I required prolonged medical leave. The second was to the credit union, where I had a small business account for my freelance work. Third, to one of Ray's friends who is a lawyer. I clarified, I need to know where I stand. With everything, with the house, with the accounts. David, the attorney, consented to meet the next day. After hanging up, I took out my laptop. Logged into the accounts that Vanessa was unaware of. Since she had never expressed interest in the dull aspects of our money, I checked the condition of investments she had never inquired about, not because I was concealing anything. Vanessa sent me another SMS while I was working on it. You're where? The depot is not where your truck is. Did they let you know I stopped by? I didn't respond. This is absurd, Jack. You cannot simply vanish. This is something we must discuss. I hung up the phone. From the kitchen, Ray turned to look. Is she contacting me? Yes. Are you going to answer? I shut down my laptop. Not just yet. I went for a stroll in Ray's neighborhood that evening. Even through the cloud of city lights, the stars could be seen on this clear night. My chest didn't pain for the first time since the hospital stay. At least not physically. During that walk, I came to the realization that I was no longer angry. I wasn't even injured. I had just finished. Clarity followed. Vanessa hadn't simply stolen my cash. She had granted me my liberty. When I eventually returned home a week after being released, it was in the middle of the day and I knew Vanessa would be at her office job. I used my key. I entered as if I had just returned from a haul. The scent of the house has changed. It wasn't my cologne. The recycling container contains empty wine bottles. In the dishwasher are 2 wine glasses. I took my passport, birth certificate, and little lockbox from the closet, along with a few garments and crucial documents. I discovered the framed picture from our wedding day was gone from the hallway table as I was leaving. I had a meeting with David, the attorney, back at Ray's. Papers were scattered around us as we sat at the kitchen table. After looking over the refinance documentation, he remarked, "The house situation is interesting. You have a strong case for sole possession because you refinanced in your name only, with that medical clause, and because of your recent cardiac event. How about the cash she stole?" David scowled. "That is more difficult. Generally speaking, joint accounts indicate common ownership." However, he tapped the bank statements with his finger. David tapped the statement and remarked, "It may be considered financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult because she cleared it out while you were medically incapacitated. Especially considering that you have proof that these were mostly your earnings." I gave a nod. "What if I desire a divorce?" He responded, "South Dakota is a state with equitable distribution. But considering the situation, I believe we can present a strong argument for a deal that benefits you." He collected the documents. "I'll write some preliminary documentation. Don't call her in the interim. If she reaches out, don't answer her. Now, everything passes through me." Vanessa came up at Ray's place the following day. I was by myself. Ray was working. I didn't glance out the window when I heard her car come up. Before she began pounding, the doorbell rang 3 times. "Campbell, I know you're in there. Down the street, your truck is parked," she said, but the door muffled her voice. "Hiding is not an option. This is something we must discuss." In the living room, I sat still, like a child playing hide-and-seek. The knocking eventually ceased. I assumed she was gone. That is, until my phone rang. "I apologize for the money. I was upset. You haven't communicated for months. I believed you to be unfaithful. I became anxious when I learned about the house refinance. We can resolve this. Talk to me, please." She had never accused me of infidelity before. Most likely, projection. Without answering, I flipped the phone face down. David called the following day with some news. "Vanessa got in touch with me," he continued. "Patricia Wells has been hired as her lawyer." Wells, Patricia. One of the state's most combative divorce lawyers. Infamous for pursuing everything, including homes, retirement funds, and potential income. For us, what does that mean? I inquired. It indicates that she isn't joking. Wells has already asserted that your abandonment following the hospital stay constituted desertion. You are being portrayed as unstable by her. Claims that you are refusing to communicate and vanished without cause. I drew a deep breath. So what? We go past this now. In reference to the money she took out, I have requested an urgent hearing. The judge in charge is Judge Whitman. He has a very negative opinion on exploiting medical circumstances. I hung up and looked at the wall for a while. I then called my niece Sophie once more. I had a specific task that required her assistance. I drove by our house that night. In the driveway was Vanessa's vehicle. There was a black Audi next to it that I didn't identify. After doing one full circuit of the block, I returned to Ray's. I received a text message in the driveway, from an unknown number. Patricia Wells is this person. Vanessa Quinn is represented by me. Any more monitoring of my customer will be recorded as harassment. All correspondence must follow the correct legal procedures. They were observing me. I was observing them. The gloves were taken off now. We had our court date, an urgent hearing over the withdrawn funds, 2 weeks after our initial appointment with David. Patricia Wells was there with Vanessa. They were both wearing excellent suits. I put on the only tie I had, the one I kept in my truck for roadside burials. An elderly guy with white hair and reading glasses balanced on the tip of his nose was Judge Whitman. Without showing emotion, he went over the documents, looking up at Vanessa and then at me. "Ms. At last," he stated, "your client withdrew all of the joint accounts while Mr. Doyle was in the hospital due to a potentially fatal cardiac event. Is that right?" Wells got up. "My client was fully entitled to access those joint money, Your Honor. In addition, we believe that the first instance of financial fraud was when Mr. Doyle refinanced their marital residence in his name alone, without Mrs. Doyle's knowledge." The judge took off his glasses. "Counselor, I'm not inquiring about the house at this time. I have a question regarding the withdrawal's date. When your client stole the money, did she know Mr. Doyle was in the hospital?" Vanessa bent down and spoke to Wells in a whisper. Wells cleared her throat. "Indeed, Your Honor. However, my client was experiencing severe emotional turmoil and thought her marriage was coming to an end. She took action to safeguard her finances." The judge replaced his glasses. "While having a heart attack and rendered unconscious? It seems improbable that Mr. Doyle would dissolve his marriage at this time." He rearranged a few documents. "Until further action is taken, I'm ordering the monies to be frozen. Until ownership is decided in the divorce settlement, neither party may access this money." Though it prevented Vanessa from spending any more, it wasn't a total victory. Vanessa tried to come up to me as we were leaving the courthouse. Wells placed a hand on her arm to hold her back, but not before Vanessa whispered, "Please, Jack, you don't understand a lot of things." I didn't look at her as I passed. David was content outside. This is only the start. We are now beginning the process of discovery. Discovery. The moment when every card is placed on the table. David summoned me to his office a week later. He had a packet ready for me when I got there. He passed it over the desk and said, "We have something." A bank statement from an account I didn't recognize was inside. It bore Vanessa's name. "You have $127,340.56 left. Where did this originate?" I inquired. David remarked, "Your niece found it. Sophie gained some knowledge from her internship at the Downtown Credit Union. We started this account 18 months ago. Consistent deposits, always slightly less than $10,000. Just below the threshold for reporting. A classic indication that money is being hidden." "There's more," David acknowledged. "The deposits fit into your long-distance itinerary. Money comes in when you're gone." I took a seat. "This has taken her a year and a half to plan." David gave a headshake. "Jack, I don't believe Mom had any intention of abandoning you. In case you left her, I believe she was getting ready." "What would make me abandon her?" I said. "To support us, I was working myself to death." David slid across another piece of paper at that point. A statement from a credit card. Hotel fee. Minneapolis. Date, 3 months in the past. That week, I had visited Seattle. The reservation's name? Jensen, Greg. Our neighbor Greg. I got a text from that person regarding some guy at the house. David had a serious expression. We believe Greg and Vanessa have been together for a while. To raise your suspicions, while they were together, he was fabricating a trail. It wasn't simply Vanessa who was betrayed. It was planned. Planned. Greg, sleeping with my wife and pretending to be the worried neighbor. While I was struggling for my life, Vanessa was depleting our funds. I got to my feet. What should we do next? For the first time that day, David grinned. It is up to you. However, I would make sure they both regret ever believing they could get away with this if I were in your position. I lived at Ray's for the following month. Physically recuperating, as David constructed our argument. Now we had a plan. Keep a record of everything. Assemble proof of Greg and Vanessa's relationship. Demonstrate the financial fraud. Sophie, my niece, was really helpful. Because of her job at the credit union, we were able to observe financial trends that we otherwise would not have. Just tying together what was already obvious, nothing illegal. One evening, she informed me that someone else had access to the account. An authorized user, not a joint owner. Greg? I made a guess. She gave a nod. And there's another thing. They have begun transferring funds, albeit in smaller sums and to various accounts. They are aware that we have them. My gaze was fixed on the window. They're selling off. Preparing to run. I gave David a call that evening. We must move more quickly. I concur, he responded. However, we must exercise caution. If we give the finger too soon, they will vanish along with everything. So, what should we do? David remained silent for a while. We require leverage. Something that makes people reconsider their decision to run. I knew Vanessa would be at work the following day, so I took the car to our house. I stayed out of the house. Rather, I used my phone to take pictures as I strolled along the property border. Greg helped build the new shed last summer. The elaborate landscaping that had arisen out of nowhere during my 3-week journey to California. Enhancements. Used my money to pay for it. Greg probably installed it. The value of the house, which was now entirely in my name, increased. I gave David the pictures along with the following brief message. Recorded. Vanessa's attorney called David 2 days later with a surprise offer. Vanessa would reimburse half of the money that was taken out. In return for half of the house's equity. When David called to inform me, he added, they're testing us to see if we'll settle cheap. What are we going to tell them? I inquired. Not yet. Allow them to perspire. I moved again in the interim. I spoke with the human resources department of my trucking firm. Described my predicament. Inquired about my 20 years of disability insurance contributions. The HR official clarified, you are eligible to receive 60% of your salary for a maximum of 12 months. You easily qualify given your cardiac event and the doctor's restrictions. That day, I filed the paperwork. Vanessa was unaware of another source of money. Would not, yet, be discussed in any settlement talks. I had Ray drive me past our house once again the next week. I observed something different this time. Greg's yard with a for sale sign. Ray remarked, he's cutting and running. I gave a nod. Give Sophie a call. Sophie verified our suspicion an hour later. 2 days prior, Greg had cleaned his accounts. Almost $90,000 was taken out. At the cashier's desk. I gave David a call right away. We must act immediately. Greg is going to sell his home. Vanessa may be preparing to accompany him. David made no hesitation. First thing tomorrow, I'll submit an application for an emergency injunction. All assets will be frozen, and real estate sales will not be permitted without court permission. When I woke up the following morning, Vanessa texted me. We must speak. Me and you alone. No attorneys. I showed Ray. He remarked, they're desperate. I gave a nod. Well done. I sent David the text message. Quickly, he answered. Don't answer. The hearing for the injunction is scheduled for 2 p.m. I saw Vanessa and Greg bickering in the parking lot as I was entering the courthouse at 1:30. They failed to notice me. I pulled out my phone and snapped a remote video of them. A 30-second video clip. Proof. Evidence of the relationship they had meticulously concealed from the court. David was waiting inside. I played the video for him. Just in time, he remarked. Judge Whitman has a certain attitude today already. I adjusted my necktie. Then let's avoid making him wait. The main courtroom was larger than Judge Whitman's chambers. Only myself, Vanessa, the 2 attorneys, and the judge. Greg was denied entry. He did not participate in the divorce. The judge's computer displayed the Vanessa and Greg footage. Not a sound. However, their nonverbal cues were quite clear. Ms. When it was done, Judge Whitman replied, Wells. Would you perhaps clarify why, despite video proof to the contrary, your client has been claiming under oath that she has no relationship with this neighbor? Wells appeared shaky. Your Honor, the financial issues at hand are unrelated to the nature of their relationship. Judge Whitman remained unflinching. It occurs when allegations of financial fraud are made. The judge looked across at Vanessa. Mrs. Will you and Mr. Jensen be leaving the state, Doyle? Vanessa's face turned white. I don't. The judge went on, let me rephrase. The court has proof that you and Mr. Jensen have been transferring large amounts of cash. That the property owned by Mr. Jensen is being sold. And that while your husband's incapacity, you took money out of joint accounts. This implies a pattern of dishonesty and a desire to escape. He glanced at the 2 attorneys. All of Greg Parker's and Vanessa Quinn's assets are being immediately frozen by me. Neither is allowed to leave the county without a judge's approval. And he looked across at me. I'm giving Mr. Doyle temporary exclusive use of the marital residence in light of his medical condition and the proof of financial exploitation during his incapacity. Vanessa choked a little sound. Your Honor, first, Wells. The judge, however, raised a hand. This court takes very seriously the exploitation of a spouse who is medically vulnerable, Counselor. You're fortunate that I don't now suggest filing criminal charges. David collected his papers while avoiding a smug expression. I noticed Vanessa as we were leaving. I witnessed terror there for the first time. Not me. Of repercussions. I returned to our home 3 months after the hospital stay. Now my home. The divorce was completed more quickly than anyone had anticipated. Vanessa did not engage in combat. Not following the hearing for the injunction. Greg was no longer there. She was left to deal with everything by herself. The judge ultimately gave me 80% of our savings, my truck, and the house. Vanessa received the remaining 20% and her automobile. They divided the secret account 50/50ths. But only after she used her part to cover my legal bills. I didn't talk to her directly ever again. Lawyers were involved in every situation. She had relocated to Minneapolis when I last heard from her. I suppose it's a fresh start. 6 months later, I sold the house. Too many memories. Purchased a smaller location nearer to Sophie and Ray. Utilized a portion of the funds to support Sophie's legal education. She will become a fantastic lawyer in the future. I no longer make long-distance drives. The doctor says that the stress is too much for my heart. Instead, I found employment dispatching. Every night, home. Compared to the open road, it is quieter. However, stability has its advantages. People occasionally inquire as to whether I'm upset about what transpired. I'm not. No more. You have no influence over what other people do. Just the way you react. That day in the ICU, Vanessa believed she was stealing everything from me. Rather, she had me stand up for myself in a way I had never done before. I came across our wedding album this week while organizing some old boxes. Considered discarding it. However, I didn't. Simply return it to the packaging. I now include it in my story. Not the end. Only one chapter. I almost died from the heart attack's effects. I almost broke because of the betrayal. However, I remain here. Modified? Perhaps. More powerful? Of course. You have to learn certain lessons the hard way. You lose to some people for good reason. And occasionally, the life you reconstruct is superior to what you lost. She ultimately freed me rather than destroying me. Sometimes the best kind of retaliation isn't anger or retaliation, but rather quiet, personal development, and a life that isn't focused on the people who wronged you. I hope you choose peace over poison and healing over anger if you have been deceived. Establish your limits. Take back your value. Let depart with honor. Have you ever experienced such intense pain that your greatest triumph was leaving? I read all of your stories, so please share yours in the comments. Let's create an environment where power is shared and healing starts.